On 28th of January 2021, just after 11:30 at night, a member of the public walking along Westville Road in Penllyn, Cardiff, makes a discovery that will trigger one of South Wales Police's most complex investigations in years. Lying on the pavement, a young man, 23 years old, gravely injured. Emergency services are called, but there's nothing they can do. Tomasz Waga from Dagenham in East London is pronounced dead at the scene. The post-mortem will later reveal the cause: airway obstruction caused by blood inhalation following severe head injuries, multiple fractures to the ribs, defensive wounds on his arms, evidence of a sustained brutal assault. But here's what makes this discovery so troubling. Less than an hour earlier, Tomasz Waga had been alive, 3 miles away, breaking into a building on Newport Road. What happened in that missing hour would take 18 months to unravel, 3 countries to search, and a missing Mercedes that has never been recovered. Fast forward 11 months. December the 4th, 2021. Tunbridge Wells, Kent. Police are called to a disturbance on K Road at 3:15 in the morning. When they arrive, they find cannabis plants scattered along the pavement, doors smashed open, and inside another body. Another young man, another violent death, another grow house raid that spiraled into murder. This time, 13 men would stand trial. 2 cases separated by time and geography, but connected by the same fatal blueprint. Albanian organized crime networks protecting high-value cannabis crops, burglars who underestimated the violent response waiting for them, and police forces left to piece together what happens when Britain's hidden drug infrastructure is breached. This is the story of the Cardiff and Tunbridge Wells cannabis factory killings. But to understand why these raids turned lethal, we need to go inside the buildings they were trying to rob. If careful UK-focused crime reporting matters to you, a quick subscribe to UK True Crime Files helps us cover more cases like this one, responsibly and thoroughly. We don't sensationalize. Re19 Newport Road, Cardiff. From the outside, it looked like any other tired, forgotten building on a busy main road. Once, it had been a GP surgery, a place where patients came for prescriptions and checkups. By January 2021, it had been transformed into something far more lucrative and far more dangerous. Inside, every upstairs room had been gutted and repurposed. Wall-to-wall cannabis plants, more than 570 in total, nurtured under bright industrial lamps, fed by an illegally diverted electricity supply. The setup was crude but effective. When fully processed, the crop carried a street value that could swing anywhere between £64,000 and £250,000, depending on purity, distribution, and how quickly it reached the streets. This wasn't a rogue operation run by amateurs. 319 Newport Road was under the control of an Albanian organised crime group, part of a network that operated multiple addresses across Cardiff, each one fortified, each one hidden in plain sight. At the heart of the property was Xhovan Pepaj, 25 years old. His role was simple: live among the plants, protect them day and night. He wasn't chosen for horticultural expertise. He was a minder, tasked with ensuring no one breached the doors without answering to those above him. And those above him were well known to South Wales Police. Joseph Nushi, 26, an enforcer figure with strong links back to Lushnja in Albania. Mihal Dahana, 27, connected to multiple grow house addresses across the city, trusted as both organizer and protector. Mario Carto, another of the group's operatives, working more in the shadows but tied closely to the network. And Glades Mahala, just 19, a runner and support player, already deep in the business before his 20s had even begun. Other names surfaced through police appeals and case files. Arton Palucci, with ties to addresses in Cathays. Elidan Alessi, linked to East Finchley in London, later charged in relation to participation in organised criminal activity. Liamd Kakani, associated with Tottenham, his name appearing on wanted notices issued after the killing. The operation was designed for secrecy. Fortified doors, illegal power bypasses, multiple safe houses to scatter risk. It was built to keep police away and to keep rivals at a distance. But in the world of cannabis grow houses, secrecy is fragile. Word spreads, addresses leak, and sooner or later, someone decides the crop is worth the risk. On the night of January the 28th, 2021, two men from London decided to test it. Thursday, the 28th of January, 2021. Cardiff is deep into a winter night when a small convoy crosses in from London. Two men have made the journey west, a burglary team heading for a specific address. Among them is Tomasz Waga, 23 years old, from Dagenham in East London. He's no stranger to police. His record already carries burglary offences, and by this night he's settled into a familiar rhythm. Alongside him is Carl Davies, the man who will later become one of the most important witnesses in the case. At around 10:30, Waga and Davies force their way into 319 Newport Road. Entry is crude and effective, the kitchen window prized open, glass and frame giving way just enough to let them climb inside. What they find confirms the intelligence they've received. Upstairs, row after row of cannabis plants, heat lamps burning, the air thick with the smell of the crop. The plan is simple. They haven't come for confrontation, they've come for plants. Armed with cutters, they go to work, stripping stalks, filling bags, moving quickly but methodically. In the drug trade, a grow house like this represents fast cash. The crop inside 319 Newport Road alone is valued at up to £120,000, a single haul worth more than most street-level robberies could ever deliver. The house has been chosen because it appears lightly guarded. A single minder inside, no signs of heavy protection. For Waga and Davies, the silence inside gives a false sense of control. But grow houses are never easy marks. What the raiders don't know is that alarms are being raised almost as soon as they enter. Heisland Alliage is quick to sense the intrusion, whether from the sound of the kitchen window forced open or the disturbance upstairs. He realizes almost immediately that the crop he's tasked to protect is under attack. His role isn't to fight back alone, it's to raise the alarm. And that's exactly what he does. Phones light up across Cardiff. Alliage's urgent calls go out to the men running the operation. And within minutes, the message is clear. Intruders are inside, stripping the crop. The response is rapid. Joseph Nushi and Michal Dahana, both central figures in the network, move fast, climbing into a Mazda, heading directly for Newport Road. From another linked address on Column Road, a Mercedes C200 Sport pulls out into the night. Registration BK09RBX. Men who had been spread across different addresses converge on the target, summoned with the expectation of immediate action. Between 10:38 and 10:43 p.m., cars are dispatched from multiple parts of the city. CCTV footage, later shown in court, captures the vehicles heading directly towards Newport Road, a flurry of movement that prosecutors would describe as a call to arms. For Nushi and Dahana, this isn't about chance or uncertainty. Their crop is under threat, and their network is built to respond. Other associates follow, each one knowing that the value at stake is worth both the risk and the violence it might demand. Upstairs, Waga and Davies are still cutting, unaware of what's coming. Their break-in has lasted barely minutes. By the time they fill their first bags, the city's underworld is already in motion, closing in on them from multiple directions. When the reinforcements storm into 319 Newport Road, the kitchen and corridors fill with chaos. The first to feel it is Carl Davies. He's cornered almost immediately, struck repeatedly with whatever comes to hand. A baseball bat, a bamboo pole, even a brick used in the assault. The blows land hard, leaving him injured and dazed. But in the confusion, he manages to break free, stumbling out of the house, slipping into the night, finding cover in nearby streets. His escape will prove vital. Davy's testimony will later piece together much of what happened inside that building. For Tomasz Waga, there is no escape. He's caught, surrounded, and dragged into a brutal, sustained assault. Witnesses and forensic evidence later confirm the scale of what he endures. Between 25 and 28 separate blows rain down on him. His ribs are fractured. His arms bear the marks of defensive wounds, showing how he tried desperately to shield himself. Severe head injuries reveal the ferocity of the strikes. This isn't random violence. Prosecutors tell the jury it's punishment, a deliberate attempt to cause grievous bodily harm rather than an immediate killing. He's to be interrogated, pressed for names, for who sent him, for who else might have been behind the raid. In that moment, Waga is no longer just a burglar. He's leverage, a way for the Albanian crew to push back against rival gangs and protect their business interests. But the violence inside 319 Newport Road is only the beginning of Waga's ordeal. When the beating is over, Waga is overpowered and forced out of the house. Blood evidence later traces the route, from the grow house to the waiting Mercedes. Bundled into the vehicle, he's taken from Newport Road under the eyes of those who had gathered to defend the crop. From Newport Road, the convoy moves quickly through Cardiff's back streets. The vehicles are tracked later on CCTV, their routes threading towards Waterloo Gardens. Inside the Mercedes, Tomasz Waga is gravely injured. He has suffered catastrophic trauma, his body struggling under the weight of the blows he's received. He's still alive when they drive him out of the grow house, but he will not survive the journey. At around 11:30, barely an hour after the raid had begun, a member of the public makes a grim discovery on Westville Road in Penilyn. Lying on the ground, Waga's body shows the marks of the violence he's endured. Emergency services are called, but there's nothing they can do. A post-mortem later confirms the cause of death: airway obstruction caused by blood inhalation following severe head injuries. In short, the attack has left him unable to breathe, his own injuries overwhelming him. This is the same Mercedes that would vanish within hours. Registration BK09RBX, the silver-grey C200 Sport that carried Waga on his final journey. Despite nationwide appeals and even a Crime Stoppers reward for information, it has never been recovered. Police believe the Mercedes holds crucial evidence: traces of Waga's blood, DNA, and possibly the very weapons used in the assault. Yet, like the men who fled abroad in the days after the killing, the vehicle slips beyond reach. Investigators suspect it's either been burned out, hidden in a lockup somewhere, or shipped overseas, back to Albania or beyond. The Mercedes that carried him there would never be found, and within 48 hours, key suspects had vanished across borders. Within hours of finding Tomasz Waga's body, South Wales police launch a murder investigation. The scene on Westville Road offers little in the way of immediate evidence. No weapons, no witnesses to the dumping, no clear indication of where the violence actually took place. But investigators quickly trace the timeline backwards. CCTV footage from multiple cameras across Cardiff becomes the backbone of the case. Frame by frame, detectives track vehicles moving through the city in the hour before Waga's body was discovered. The Mazda, the Mercedes C200 Sport. Both vehicles captured heading towards Newport Road just after 10:30 p.m. The footage shows a coordinated response. Cars arriving from different directions converging on a single address. From there, cameras pick up the Mercedes leaving the area, heading towards Penilyn, the direction where Waga would later be found. The timeline fits, and the vehicle becomes central to the investigation. But by the time police identify the registration, BK09RBX is already gone. forensic teams descend on 319 Newport Road. Inside, the scale of the operation is clear. More than 500 cannabis plants spread across multiple rooms, electrical bypasses diverting thousands of pounds worth of power. Blood evidence is recovered from the kitchen, the hallway, and the stairs, consistent with a violent assault. Fragments of weapons are found: a broken baseball bat, pieces of bamboo, a brick stained with blood. The pattern matches what Carl Davis will later describe in his witness statement: a chaotic, multi-weapon attack designed to incapacitate and punish. Davis himself has fled the scene injured but alive. When he comes forward to police, his account becomes a critical piece of the puzzle. He describes the break-in, the forced entry through the kitchen window, the cannabis plants they'd been cutting, the sudden arrival of multiple men. He identifies Joseph Nushi and Michal Dahana as among the attackers, names already known to South Wales Police through previous intelligence on Albanian organised crime networks. But Davies also admits his own role. He's a burglar, caught in the act, complicit in the raid that triggered the violence. His testimony is messy, self-incriminating, and incomplete. But it's enough to give investigators names, faces, and a sequence of events. The investigation rapidly expands. Police execute warrants across Cardiff, targeting addresses linked to the Albanian network. Colham Road, Cathays, multiple properties tied to cannabis cultivation and the same group of suspects. At one address, officers recover documents, phones, and evidence linking several individuals to the grow house operation. But the key suspects are already moving. Joseph Nushi, gone. Michal Dahana, gone. Mario Cartau, gone. Artan Palucci, gone. Leand Kachani, gone. Within 48 hours of Wager's death, at least 5 men connected to the Newport Road address have fled the UK. Some head for Dover, crossing the Channel into France before authorities can intercept them. Others take more circuitous routes: flights to Amsterdam, connections through Eastern Europe, final destinations back in Albania. For South Wales Police, the manhunt becomes international. Europol is notified, arrest warrants are issued, and appeals go out across multiple countries. Detective Chief Inspector Mark O'Shea, leading the investigation, makes a public statement. He describes the killing as a brutal act of retaliation, a violent response to a burglary that spiraled into murder. He appeals for witnesses: anyone who saw the Mercedes, anyone with information about the men who fled. Crime Stoppers offers a reward, but weeks pass with no breakthrough. The missing Mercedes remains a ghost, never recovered, never traced beyond the final CCTV sighting near Westville Road. The 5 fugitives remain beyond reach, protected by distance, by borders, by networks that know how to keep people hidden. For 18 months, the investigation grinds forward. Extradition requests are filed, diplomatic channels are activated, and slowly, painstakingly, South Wales Police begin to bring suspects back to the UK. Heiseland Aliage, the minder who had been inside 319 Newport Road, is arrested and charged. Glades Mahala, the 19-year-old associate, is taken into custody. One by one, others are tracked down. Some arrested in the UK, others extradited from abroad. But the core group, Nushi, Dahana, Cartau, remain out of reach. By the time the case reaches trial in 2022, prosecutors face a difficult reality. They have CCTV evidence, they have forensic traces, they have Carl Davies' testimony. But they don't have the Mercedes, they don't have the weapons, and they don't have the men who orchestrated the violence. What they do have is enough to charge those who were caught, and enough to tell the jury what happened on the night of January 28, 2021. In July 2022, the trial begins at Cardiff Crown Court. 4 defendants stand accused in connection with Tomasz Waga's death. Xhovan Pepaj, 25, the minder who had been inside 319 Newport Road when the burglary took place. Glades Mahala, 19, a younger associate tied to the network. Elidan Alessi, 23, linked to the operation through his connection to addresses in East Finchley. And Mario Carto, 25, who had fled abroad but was eventually brought back to face charges. The prosecution's case is methodical. They present CCTV footage showing vehicles converging on Newport Road within minutes of the break-in. They show the Mazda and the Mercedes leaving the area, heading in the direction where Waga's body would later be found. They present forensic evidence from 319 Newport Road. Blood traces, weapon fragments, signs of a violent confrontation. And crucially, they present Carl Davies. Davies takes the stand as a witness, admitting his own role in the burglary, describing the forced entry, the cannabis plants, the sudden arrival of multiple attackers. He identifies Joseph Nushi and Michal Dahana, though neither man is present in court. He describes being beaten with bats and poles, managing to escape while Waga was overwhelmed. His testimony is imperfect, self-serving in places, incomplete in others, but it provides the jury with a narrative, a sequence of events that links the break-in to the assault and the assault to the body found on Westville Road. The prosecution argues that the defendants were part of a joint enterprise. Even if not every man struck the fatal blows, they were participants in a coordinated, violent response designed to inflict serious harm. Under UK law, that makes them complicit in murder. The defense challenges the evidence. They question the reliability of CCTV footage, pointing out that vehicle movements alone don't prove involvement in violence. They challenge Carl Davies's credibility, a burglar with his own criminal record trying to deflect blame. They argue that some defendants had only peripheral roles, present at addresses, yes, but not directly involved in the assault on Waga. For weeks, the trial unfolds. Witnesses called, evidence examined, legal arguments debated. The jury is tasked with determining who did what, and whether the actions of each defendant meet the threshold for murder. On the 27th of July 2022, the verdicts are delivered. Xhovan Pepaj, guilty of manslaughter. The jury finds that while he participated in the violent response, the evidence doesn't support a murder conviction. He's sentenced to 11 years in prison. Glades Mahala, guilty of manslaughter. The 19-year-old is sentenced to 9 years. Elidan Alessi, convicted of participating in the activities of an organized crime group. He receives a 3-year sentence. Mario Carto, acquitted. Despite the prosecution's efforts, the jury finds insufficient evidence to tie him directly to the violence. The courtroom absorbs the verdicts quietly. For Tomasz Waga's family, the outcome is bittersweet. 2 men are held accountable, but not for murder. The men who orchestrated the assault, Joseph Nushi, Michal Dahana, and others, remain fugitives. The missing Mercedes, the weapons, the full scope of what happened inside 319 Newport Road, all remain partly obscured. Detective Chief Inspector Mark O'Shea addresses the media outside the court. He describes the convictions as a significant result, but acknowledges the frustration of key suspects still at large. He renews the appeal for information about the missing vehicle, about Nushi and Dahana, about anyone who might have knowledge of their whereabouts. Europol's warrants remain active, but as of late 2022, the fugitives have not been found. Tomasz Waga's death has been answered with partial justice, convictions secured, sentences handed down, but the case remains open in every way that matters. The men who led the attack walk free. The vehicle that carried Waga on his final journey is still missing, and the network that protected 319 Newport Road continues to operate, in Cardiff, in London, across borders. For investigators, the Cardiff case represents both success and limitation. They built a case from fragments: CCTV, forensics, a reluctant witness, 18 months of painstaking work. They brought 4 men to trial and secured convictions against 2. But the core of the network slipped away, and in doing so, they left a blueprint, a template for what happens when grow house raids turn violent and those responsible vanish before justice can reach them. The Cardiff case would not be the last time this pattern played out. 11 months after Tomasz Waga's death, another burglary, another grow house, another body. This time in Tunbridge Wells, December 4th, 2021. 11 months after Tomasz Waga's body was found in Cardiff, another cannabis factory, another violent confrontation. This time, the location is K Road, Tunbridge Wells, a quiet residential street in Kent, far removed from the urban density of Cardiff's main roads. Number 2 K Road sits unassuming among terraced houses. Curtains drawn, no signs of activity visible from the street. Inside, the property has been transformed. Every available room on the ground floor and upstairs has been converted into a growing space. Cannabis plants in various stages of cultivation, heat lamps rigged to illegal power supplies, ventilation systems bypassing the standard electrical grid. The setup mirrors the Cardiff operation, crude but effective, designed for volume rather than sophistication. Police estimates later placed the street value of the crop between £85,000 and £170,000. Another high-value target, another property under the control of an Albanian organised crime network. And just like Cardiff, the house isn't left unguarded. Living inside 2K Road is Gertie Dake, 29 years old, an Albanian national tasked with the same role Xhovan Pepaj had played in Cardiff. Protect the crop, stay inside, raise the alarm if anything goes wrong. Dake isn't working alone in the broader operation. The Tunbridge Wells network includes multiple players, some local, some with connections stretching back to London and beyond. Bledar Hasko, 31, a key organiser, connected to multiple addresses and deeply embedded in the logistics of the operation. Emiliano Ginaj, 33, another central figure, later identified as having direct involvement in the events of December 4th. Victor Dragaj, 37, linked to the network through his ties to other members, his role less visible but no less significant. Redon Rama, 30, an associate whose name surfaces in phone records and surveillance footage. And Pauline Mucci, 28, another member of the group tied to the Tunbridge Wells address through forensic evidence recovered after the killing. The network extends beyond Tunbridge Wells. Raif Nurja, 32, connected to addresses in Islington, North London, part of a wider supply and distribution chain. Xhovan Pepaj, 31, tied to the same Islington network, his movements tracked through phone data and CCTV in the days surrounding the incident. Desimir Princic, 36, a Serbian national, later charged in connection with the case. Valdrin Nikola, 28, another Albanian associate, his role emerging through witness statements and digital evidence. Elvis Neza, 29, linked to the operation through his connections to other defendants. Fation Bunjaku, 31, tied to the network's logistics, his name appearing in multiple strands of the investigation. And finally, Arsen Rama, 32, connected to both the Tunbridge Wells and London elements of the operation. 13 names in total, a network far larger and more complex than the Cardiff case. But the blueprint is the same: high-value cannabis crops, fortified addresses, minders living on site, and a network ready to respond violently if the operation is threatened. The Tunbridge Wells factory had been operating quietly for months. Neighbours noticed little, perhaps the occasional comings and goings, curtains that never opened, but nothing alarming enough to prompt concern. From the outside, 2K Road looked like just another rented property in a residential street. Inside, it was a carefully managed criminal enterprise, one that, like Cardiff, depended on secrecy to survive. But secrecy, once again, proved fragile. On the night of December 4th, 2021, a burglary team targeted the address. And just like Cardiff, the response was immediate, coordinated, and lethal. The early hours of December 4th, 2021. A burglary team arrives at 2K Road with a clear objective: the cannabis crop inside. The target has been selected carefully. Intelligence gathered, surveillance conducted, the layout and security assessed. What the raiders don't know is that the network protecting the property is already primed for exactly this kind of intrusion. Entry is forced shortly after 3 a.m. The burglars breach the front door, smashing their way through locks and frames, moving quickly to minimize the time they're exposed. Inside, they find exactly what they expected: rows of cannabis plants, heat lamps glowing, the unmistakable smell of a working grow house. But they also find Gertie Dake. The minder is inside, tasked with protecting the crop, and the moment the door is breached, he knows what's required. Just like Xhovan Pepaj in Cardiff, Dake's role isn't to fight alone. It's to raise the alarm, and that's exactly what he does. Within minutes, phones across the network light up. Bledar Haskell receives word of the intrusion, the message spreading rapidly to other members of the group. Emiliano Ginage is alerted. Victor Dragage mobilizes. From addresses in Tunbridge Wells and beyond, the response begins. Cars are dispatched, weapons gathered, men converging on K Road with the expectation of violence. The burglary team inside has minutes, perhaps less, before the situation turns. But they press on, cutting plants, filling bags, moving through the house with the urgency of people who know time is running out. CCTV footage, later presented in court, captures the chaos of what happens next. Vehicles arrive at K Road from multiple directions, some parking nearby, others circling the street. Men exit the cars, moving quickly towards the property, some carrying weapons openly. The coordinated response is unmistakable. This isn't chance, it's a mobilized network reacting to a direct threat. Inside the house, the confrontation erupts. The burglars realize too late that they're outnumbered, the reinforcements pouring through the door, cutting off escape routes. What follows is a violent, chaotic assault. Weapons are used: bats, poles, blunt instruments swung with force. The raiders are struck repeatedly, some managing to break free and flee into the street, others trapped inside the property. Cannabis plants are scattered across the pavement outside, evidence of the burglary spilling into public view as the violence unfolds. Neighbors hear the commotion, shouts, crashes, the unmistakable sounds of a fight. One of the burglars, gravely injured, collapses inside the property. Gertie Dake. Wait, no, not Gertie Dake. Gertie Dake is the minder, the man who raised the alarm, who stayed inside to protect the crop. The man who collapses, gravely injured, is one of the burglars. His name is Flamur Bakiri, a 36-year-old originally from Kosovo, living in Southwark, South London. He's part of the raiding team, and in the chaos of the assault, he becomes the target of the network's violent retaliation. Bakiri is struck repeatedly, the blows landing with enough force to cause catastrophic injuries. By the time the violence subsides, he's unconscious, bleeding, barely breathing, left on the floor of the grow house as the network retreats. Emergency services are called at 3:15 in the morning. Police and paramedics arrive at K Road to find a scene of devastation. Cannabis plants littering the pavement, doors smashed open, and inside, Flamur Bakiri critically injured. He's rushed to hospital, but the damage is too severe. Despite the efforts of medical teams, Bakiri is pronounced dead. The post-mortem later reveals the cause: blunt force trauma to the head and chest, consistent with a sustained, violent assault. The parallels to Cardiff are impossible to ignore. Another cannabis factory, another burglary, another violent response from an organized network, another body. But this time, the investigation will move faster. This time, the network won't have the same window to flee. Unlike Cardiff, where key suspects vanished within 48 hours, the Tunbridge Wells investigation moves with speed and precision. Kent police treat the scene at 2K Road as both a murder site and a major organized crime operation. Forensic teams work through the night, photographing the scattered cannabis plants, recovering weapon fragments, tracing blood evidence through the property. The broken door, the smashed frames, the signs of forced entry, all documented in meticulous detail. But it's the digital evidence that accelerates the case. Within hours, investigators pull CCTV footage from cameras across Tunbridge Wells. The recordings capture vehicles arriving at K Road in the minutes after the alarm was raised, cars parking nearby, men exiting and moving towards the property. License plates are cross-referenced, phone data is analysed, and a network begins to emerge. Unlike the Cardiff fugitives, many of the Tunbridge Wells suspects are still within reach. Some are arrested within days. Bledar Haskell, taken into custody at an address in Tunbridge Wells. Emiliano Ginaj, arrested in connection with the violent response, his movements tracked through phone records and witness statements. Victor Dragaj, detained after investigators link him to the network through digital forensics. Gertie Dakay, the minder who had been inside the property, is arrested and charged. His role is clear. He raised the alarm, setting in motion the violent retaliation that led to Flamur Bakiri's death. Others are tracked down through coordinated operations. Raif Nurja and Heisland Aliaj, both arrested at addresses in Islington, North London. Their connections to the Tunbridge Wells operation established through phone data and surveillance. Desimir Princic, the Serbian national, arrested after forensic evidence places him at the scene. Valdrin Nikola, Elvis Neza, Fation Bunjaku, Arsen Rama, each one brought into custody as the investigation widens. By mid-December, just weeks after Bakiri's death, 13 men are in police custody. The operation is one of the largest coordinated arrests Kent Police has conducted in recent years. Detective Chief Inspector Neil Kimber leads the investigation, and from the outset, he makes it clear that this case will be pursued aggressively. In a statement to the media, Kimber describes the killing as a brutal example of organized crime violence, a coordinated attack designed to protect a high-value criminal enterprise. He emphasizes the speed of the arrests, contrasting the Tunbridge Wells response with cases where suspects flee abroad before they can be detained. The message is unambiguous. This network will not escape justice. But building the case for trial requires more than arrests. Prosecutors need to establish who did what, who struck the fatal blows, who coordinated the response, who participated in the joint enterprise that led to Bakiri's death. Forensic evidence is crucial. DNA recovered from weapons, blood traces linking defendants to the scene, phone records showing the flurry of communication in the minutes after the alarm was raised. CCTV footage provides a visual timeline. Vehicles arriving, men entering the property, the chaotic aftermath as cannabis plants are scattered into the street. Witness statements add another layer. Neighbors describe hearing shouts and crashes, seeing men running from the property, cars speeding away. Some of the burglary team who escaped the assault come forward, reluctantly, under caution, but willing to provide accounts of what happened inside 2K Road. Their testimony, like Carl Davis in Cardiff, is imperfect. They're criminals themselves, caught in the act, complicit in the raid that triggered the violence, but their accounts corroborate the forensic evidence and give prosecutors a narrative thread to follow. By early 2022, the Crown Prosecution Service has enough to proceed. 13 defendants are charged with murder, manslaughter, and related offences. The scale of the case is unprecedented. Multiple defendants, overlapping defences, a complex web of evidence spanning phones, CCTV, forensics, and witness statements. The trial is set for Maidstone Crown Court, and unlike Cardiff, where key suspects remained fugitives, this time everyone accused of involvement in Flamur Bakiri's death will stand in the dock. The trial begins at Maidstone Crown Court in June 2023. 13 defendants sit in the dock, the largest murder trial Kent has seen in years. Each man faces charges ranging from murder to manslaughter to violent disorder, the prosecution alleging that they participated in a joint enterprise that led directly to Flamur Bakiri's death. The courtroom is packed. Legal teams for each defendant fill the benches. Multiple barristers, solicitors, interpreters for those whose first language isn't English. The jury faces a monumental task, separating individual actions from collective responsibility, determining who struck fatal blows and who merely participated in the violent response. The prosecution opens with a clear narrative. Flamur Bakiri and his accomplices broke into 2K Road to steal a high-value cannabis crop. Gertie Dake, the minder inside, raised the alarm. Within minutes, members of the Albanian organised crime network descended on the property. Armed, coordinated, intent on protecting their investment. What followed was a brutal, sustained assault. Bakiri, beaten with weapons, struck repeatedly, left dying on the floor of the grow house. The prosecution argues that even those who didn't deliver the fatal blows share responsibility. By participating in the coordinated response, by arming themselves and travelling to K Road, by entering the property knowing violence was inevitable, they became part of a joint enterprise. Under English law, that makes them guilty of murder. The evidence is presented methodically. CCTV footage shows vehicles converging on K Road, the timestamps matching phone records that capture the flurry of communication after Dake's alarm. Forensic evidence links several defendants directly to the scene. DNA on weapons, blood traces, fibers recovered from clothing. Phone data reveals the network's structure, who called who, when, and in what sequence. Witness testimony from surviving members of the burglary team describes the chaos inside the house. Men pouring through the door, weapons swinging, Bakiri overwhelmed and beaten. The medical evidence is stark. Dr. Charlotte Randall, a Home Office pathologist, testifies about Bakiri's injuries. Blunt force trauma to the head, fractured ribs, internal bleeding consistent with repeated forceful strikes. She describes the injuries as unsurvivable, the kind of damage inflicted by sustained violence, not a single blow. The prosecution rests its case with a simple assertion. Flamur Bakiri was a burglar, but he didn't deserve to die. The response from the network was disproportionate, coordinated, and lethal, and those who participated must be held accountable. The defense strategies vary. Some defendants argue they weren't present at K Road, that CCTV footage and phone records place them elsewhere, or that their involvement has been misidentified. Others admit being part of the network, but deny direct involvement in the assault, claiming they arrived after the violence had ended or that their role was peripheral. A few challenge the joint enterprise doctrine itself, arguing that being part of a criminal network doesn't automatically make them responsible for another person's actions. The trial stretches across weeks. Witnesses are called and cross-examined. Forensic experts challenged on their conclusions. Phone data scrutinized for alternative interpretations. The jury deliberates for days. On August 11, 2023, they return with verdicts. Bladar Hasko, guilty of murder. The jury finds he played a central role in organizing the violent response. He's sentenced to life imprisonment with a minimum term of 28 years. Emiliano Ginaj, guilty of murder. His involvement in the assault is deemed direct and deliberate. Life imprisonment, minimum 26 years. Gertie Dake, guilty of manslaughter. The jury accepts he didn't strike the fatal blows, but his alarm triggered the violence. 18 years. Victor Dragaj, guilty of manslaughter. 16 years. Desimir Princic, guilty of manslaughter. 15 years. Valdrin Nicola, guilty of manslaughter. 14 years. Raif Nurja, guilty of violent disorder. The evidence shows he participated in the response, but didn't directly assault Bakiri. 7 years. Heisland Aliaj, guilty of violent disorder. 6 years. 5 other defendants, acquitted. The jury finds insufficient evidence to prove their involvement beyond reasonable doubt. They walk free from the courtroom, but the convictions secured against the others send a clear message. Outside the court, Detective Chief Inspector Neil Kimber addresses the media. He describes the verdicts as a significant victory, not just for Kent Police, but for the principle that organised crime violence will be met with serious consequences. He acknowledges the complexity of the case. 13 defendants, overlapping defences, months of painstaking evidence gathering. But he emphasises the result. 8 men convicted, 2 life sentences for murder, multiple manslaughter convictions. Justice, he says, has been served. For Flamour Bakiri's family, the verdicts offer some closure. Their son, brother, father was a criminal, yes. He broke into a property to steal drugs. But the response he faced was brutal, coordinated, and lethal. And now, those responsible have been held accountable. The Tunbridge Wells case stands in stark contrast to Cardiff. Where Cardiff saw fugitives escape and key evidence vanish, Tunbridge Wells delivered convictions across the board. Where Cardiff resulted in 2 manslaughter verdicts and acquittals for others, Tunbridge Wells secured 2 murder convictions and a sweep of related charges. The difference wasn't just investigative speed, it was the completeness of the evidence. CCTV, forensics, phones, witnesses, all aligned to build a case the jury could rely on. And it was the absence of escape routes. The network didn't have time to flee. They were arrested, charged, and brought to trial while the evidence was still fresh. 2 cannabis factory killings. 2 burglary teams who underestimated the violent response waiting for them. 2 Albanian organised crime networks willing to kill to protect their investments. But 2 very different outcomes. Cardiff, partial justice, fugitives still at large, key evidence lost forever. Tunbridge Wells, comprehensive convictions, the network dismantled, accountability delivered. The question is, why? What made one case solvable and the other only partially so? The answer lies in 3 critical factors: speed, evidence, and borders. First, speed. In Cardiff, the suspects had a 48-hour window between Tomasz Waga's death and the first arrests. That window was enough. Joseph Nushi, Michal Dahana, Mario Carto, and others fled to Dover, crossed into France, and disappeared into networks that stretched back to Albania. By the time South Wales police identified them as suspects, they were already beyond reach. In Tunbridge Wells, Kent police moved faster. Arrests began within days, some suspects detained before they even realized the investigation had identified them. The network didn't have time to organize escapes, destroy evidence, or coordinate alibis. Speed collapsed their options.